Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. It's about 10 to 8 tonight. Just getting rolling here on the Sunday night live stream. The purple one is in the house. Hey, what's happening, purple one? We got five people watching. What is everybody? We're going to let the room fill up a little bit here. Get a few people kind of in the mix. Oh, speaking of people, he's not quite a person yet. Maybe in his next lifetime, he's about to make his grand appearance. And wouldn't you know, right on time, it's Jasper the Astro Cat making his presence known here on the Sunday night live stream. Now we got 7 people watching. And I guess 8 people if you bring Jasper. He's not really quite a person. How's it going, Purple One? I don't think he'll be alone for long. Should get a few more people coming in. Let me go over to Facebook and let people know. Hey, Judy, what's happening? Thank you for the birthday wish. I appreciate that. Let me jump on over to Facebook and what's going on, Amy Maxey? Nice to see you. Facebook time. I haven't been on Facebook all day. I've been laying low and hanging out, watching some kind of decent football, some not so decent football today. Ani, wishing me a happy birthday. Right on. Thank you. Thank you, Ani. I'll get back into Facebook and give a bunch of thanks to a bunch of people. It's always fun getting those birthday wishes on Facebook. Let me just go into the 11th house part of the site and or part of Facebook, and I'll just throw this up there. Let's see, live now over YouTube. YouTube. Jasper, you're getting very familiar with the microphone tonight. There we go. Great picture for me over on Facebook and YouTube. Not really. Not really. Okay, where are we? I just let people know that we're hanging out. Let's see, there's Mary. Hey, Mary, what's going on? There's Tanya. Thanks, Tanya, Mary. Appreciate it. There's the lovely Joan S. Thank you, Joan. Derek, what's going on, man? Yes, we're coming into the equinox. And thanks for the birthday greeting. Thank you. So it's an interesting birthday. This is my last birthday of the 50s. It's my last 50th birthday. Next year it clicks over into the big 60. My God, it's hard to believe that I've been on this planet for 60 freaking years, man. 60 years. It's mind-blowing. Anyway, it's the last year of the 50s. I'm gonna do my best to make it the very best. Kind of lay it all out there. I think that's what it's gonna be. It's 2020, the year of the rat. I'm a rat. Just gonna lay it all out there. Why not? I think that's the plan. I think that's Jasper's plan too. He's gonna lay it all out there. In fact, he's gonna lay it all out here tonight. Jasper is gonna give his best YouTube that he's ever given, I think, since he's been a part of this experience. That's what he told me earlier today. He says, man, when I come on, like he was here right at the beginning. Okay, so Jasper means business. Jasper's channeling some deep shit tonight. You can count on it. Okay, so he's bringing his A game. All right, let's see who else is over in the chat room. Who's being a part of tonight's experience? There's Marlene. Hey, Marlene, how are you? Thank you for the birthday wish. And there's Glenn. Hey, Glenn, good to see you. Liz Alicious. Hi, Liz. Thank you. Equinox is tomorrow. That's right. It's usually on the 22nd. Sometimes it's on the 23rd. Tomorrow it's on the 23rd. Tomorrow we go into zero Libra. There's Lynette. Hey, Lynette. Thank you. Tanya turned 40 yesterday. Congratulations, Tanya. I hope you had a really good birthday. I spent my 40th birthday in Paris. I thought to myself, you know, if I'm going to be somewhere on my 40th birthday, I think Paris is the place to be. It was an unusual night, for sure. I had a friend who was living there, and somebody I knew from California, and we were good friends. She's the actor of she was the mother of a semi-famous actor in the States, maybe known for something a little bit more outside of acting. We were friends. So I was staying at her place for a few days, and I went to my 40th birthday. She took me to a can-can show, you know, with the legs and topless boobies and stuff like that. That's what I did. It wasn't my plan, but that's how it all went down. Hi, Anna. What's happening? Nice to see you. So what did you do on your 40th birthday, Tanya? Where did you spend the big 4-0? Did you have any special thingamajig that you did? Any special celebration? I'm sure if you could probably let chat land you. I won't repeat it on the air. Hey, Anna. Nice to see you, Anna Wilson. Yeah, we're starting to get some people in here tonight. Starting to kind of pick up. Tomorrow, next week, I'll be shifting the time for this show. Usually I'm around between 7:30 and 8. Next week, we're going to start to go to a hard 6 p.m. for the Sunday night show. Just an FYI, just 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, because things are going to change and light changes, and it's just a good time to do it a little bit earlier. So if you're into this show and you like it, it'll be around 6 p.m. starting next week. Okay. Hey, there's Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Shari, YouTube no longer says how long the video has been streaming for. YouTube is always changing the game. I got an email from YouTube, and basically they're letting their content creators know that they are going to withhold comments, sensitive comments, meaning not just comments during chat, which they've kind of been doing already for a while, but comments from, and I think they've been doing this because sometimes, you know, people will comment on stuff and I'll have to go into some kind of a folder and see that there have been comments that YouTube has said is going to be inappropriate, but now they're getting even tighter about it. So just to let you know, they're kind of doing what they do, which is creating their mind crime, pre-crime, thought police. Apparently, Facebook is getting in on the action too. This is a very interesting development with Facebook. And Facebook is creating their own Supreme Court. This is a really interesting and frankly a bizarre development, but it gets into that Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, where we see this conglomeration of private corporations and government. It's happening, and it started, remember, it started in 2009 when there was the housing crisis. And by the way, I'm going to talk about what I think is going to be the next financial crisis. And I'm going to introduce you to one of the key players who I think is kind of a linchpin for that financial crisis. And that'll be tonight. But if we go back and look at what happened in 2009, of course, there was the housing crisis and the absolute, utter collapse of that. People lost their homes. It was a terrible, absolutely brutal time. Brutal time. And some of you are probably aware of this because a lot of you are really turned on. In fact, all of you are turned on. But there was so much blowback, and people were furious, and they were literally melting the phone lines in Washington, D.C. And it was so bad that the House passed the measure to not bail out the banks. I mean, they were like, no, we're not going to do this. And well, that changed, didn't it? You had Ben Bernanke and what's his name? Clausen. Ben Bernanke and Clausen. Apparently, the rumor was that Clausen, or was it Clausen? Hold on. I always get it confused with Olson. But Ben Bernanke was brought in, and basically he told the Congress that if they didn't pass the recovery bill, if they didn't do it, then they were going to declare martial law. So they had to vote a second time, even after people were just incredibly pissed off. So what happened after that, we've actually tracked that, is that the government got involved in corporate business, and they rescued Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and then they bailed out Bear Stearns, and then Bear Stearns went belly. After they bailed them out, they bailed out Lehman Brothers, and then Lehman Brothers went belly. They bailed out GM. Was actually the United States actually owned GM for a short period of time. So the country, the government got really involved with the whole process. And that's where we saw this merging of the two. That's when it all began to kind of come, very clear. There was a focus on what was taking place. And the collapse happened, started it with Lehman Brothers on September 15th of 2008. Of course, it rolled into 2009. But we saw this merging of the government and corporations in a way that we'd never seen before. And of course, that's when Pluto and Capricorn hit. And that's when, I wrote a lot about that when it happened. I wrote a ton about that. So here we are again. It's 2019, and we're 10 years out from that time. And I'm going to get into where I think probably the most volatile market potential, and there's a lot of volatility right now, a ton of volatility. You have the student loan crisis. There's a ton of volatility in the student loan world because people are just, the amount of debt with the student loan is just outrageous. We have the brick and mortar crisis, and more stores are being shuttered. I saw a list of stores from like the Gap, which was a huge winner for a long period of time. The Gap is rapidly losing their market share. So the Gap is closing a lot of their stores. They're kind of transitioning because they own Old Navy, and they're transitioning more of their market share into Old Navy because Old Navy kind of represents a younger demographic. It is by and large not as trendy, not as trend heavy or brand heavy as the Gap. So that's going on. Timothy Geithner inherited the crisis. The Ben Bernanke, Shalom Ben Bernanke, he's a rabbi. He was the guy that was basically running everything at that time. And afterwards, after they had sent all the money out to all the various, wherever they were sending it, Europe, all the various banks, Bernanke said he didn't know where any of it went. I mean, the whole thing was just nuts, just totally freaking nuts. So I'm going to look into sort of where I think the next weak link is, and there's plenty of weak links. Trust me, there is a lot going on. And Trump is looking at negative interest rates. It's Paulson. That's who I was thinking of. Henry Paulson. The weird thing about Paulson was that there was a rumor that Paulson, I know this is crazy, but there was a rumor that Paulson was actually dead. Like he was dead and they had resurrected him for this financial crisis. And there were people who saw him and they were shocked. They said, look, you can look it up. This stuff will be on the internet for a little while longer. Then they're just going to start, I think, putting the liquid paper to the stuff, and you're just going to blot it out. It's going to erase it. So we'll get into that tonight. I'll talk about what I think, or where I think the major weak spot is. I'm also going to look ahead to the 2020 election tonight. I'm going to look at that chart, and I'm going to also look at the chart of the moment, obviously. And there's continuing to be a ton of buzz around Greta Thunberg, and she just recently was on the cover of ID magazine, where she was essentially performing the Eye of Horus routine, which is a clear sign that she has been initiated. And the interesting thing about Greta Thunberg is that she comes from a family, a long line of actors. Her father was a very well-known actor in Sweden, and her grandfather was a very well-known actor in Sweden. And her mother is an opera singer. So she comes from a family of performers. So Greta Thunberg has in her DNA the sort of the genetic makeup of actors and performers. And right now, she's definitely playing a role in the world stage. I would not be surprised if Greta Thunberg is nominated for a Nobel Prize. I would not be surprised at all. And they're doing everything in their power to promote her so that she can be the face of climate change. Now, I've been comparing her to Joan of Arc, that she's some kind of reanimation of Joan of Arc. And then I looked at Greta's birthday, which was January 3rd. And then I looked up Joan of Arc's birthday, and it's January 6th. So they're born 3 days apart. They're both Capricorns. I'll get into that when I look at her chart, and I actually exhumed Joan of Arc's chart from the ashes of history. So we'll look at that tonight. We'll look at the chart of the moment, and I think that's it. I think that's it. All right, let's get this show on the road. Let me just do a quick check. So what's going on in Chatlandia? See what's happening there. What do we see here? The future is autistic. It's a cool thing, right? It's a trend. Someone needs to get that girl a personality. Thanks, Jan. Thank you very much. Robert, would Yahoo search be a better alternative? DuckDuckGo is okay, but I'm not crazy about DuckDuckGo's all right. It's okay. It's not bad. It's not bad. DuckDuckGo gets a lot of their search results from Yahoo and Bing. So they don't just get one set of results from one search provider. Yahoo's search is terrible. And Yahoo was bailed out by Google a while back because Yahoo was really on the fence. Like they were just bleeding cash. And so Google came in and basically said, we're going to take you over. We're going to take you over. We're going to do sales, through Yahoo so Yahoo's like the little sister of Google at this point. And we know that Google is an arm of the NSA to a large extent. Google was built at Stanford, and Stanford is Langley West. So the intelligence community has deep roots inside of Google. So as a result of that, Yahoo does too. Bing, of course, is Microsoft's search engine. And we all know how great Microsoft is. So that's where DuckDuckGo gets a lot of their search results. You'll see things that are different. I mean, it won't come up the same as Google results, thank God. Like if you do a search for Mercola on DuckDuckGo, Mercola on Google, they'll be different. So yeah, there's a very interesting search engine called Yandex. And Yandex is a Russian search engine. And just like all the other search engines, they scoop your material, or they all do. So, but you'll get different search results. Like I was doing kind of a deep dive and a deep dig on Marianne Williamson about a month ago. And I was doing all these keywords and search terms and going through the various search engines. And Yandex yielded some of the better search results. So you may play with Yandex, but be forewarned, you might be accused of being a Russian spy. So there we go. All right, why don't we fire up the chart of the moment and let's see what's going on right now, here and now, or at the very least, just before the show. So let me open this up. Here it is. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. The chart of the moment. I feel like it should be like a Monty Python thing. Here we go. Here she is, boys and girls. We got a. Oh, this is for Oklahoma City, and it's okay. It's not that far away. Pretty much the same. Okay, we got Aries rising, Chiron there on the first house cusp, moving more into the 12th house cusp. Neptune in its natural house, in its dignity there in the 12th house. And then we have, we've got the moon in the 4th house, also in dignity. Hey, how about that? We have Venus in the 7th house in dignity. We have Jupiter in the 9th house in dignity and Saturn in the 10th house in dignity. We've got just about every single planet there covered. Well, not all of them. We got on the cardinal points plus, well, not really. We have Neptune in dignity in the 12th, Moon in dignity in the 4th, Venus in dignity in the 7th, Jupiter in dignity in the 9th, and Saturn in dignity in the 10th. That's great. Okay, I think I'm done. Show's over. No. So what does that mean? Well, it means that for now, tonight, there is a kind of a hush all over the world. No, there is there's a how do I say this? An inherent and an organic balance. When you see, and this is rare, by the way, you won't see this very often. So this is kind of a special night. And that doesn't mean that there isn't conflict in the chart, because we've got this nice big fat T-square going on. We got another T-square here. We got some opposition. So there's plenty of friction in the chart. But I mean, let's just say that this is the chart of an individual. This individual will have a very interesting life, because the energy of the planets in the particular houses this is what we would call accidental dignity, right? That it would be, that they would have, how would I say this? The energy that they would pull from the chart would have a great deal of integrity. And what I mean by that is they, as individuals, might be challenged at times, perhaps, with their own integrity as individuals, but the chart itself has a certain integrity to it. It's sort of like the bones on a house. And my father always used to talk about, he could say, that house has good bones, meaning that you could tell that there was something behind the structure of the house that gave it kind of a sense of solidity, or again, the word would be integrity. And this would be a chart that would be similar. And this individual, even though, let's say they were born at this time, this individual could go through a great deal of stress, which they would with these T-squares and the oppositions. And yet, because they had all these planets essentially in their homes, I think they would have a better chance of overcoming the inherent challenges of this chart, that they'd be able to pull from the energy of those planets much more easily. And that's why I'm referencing this chart has quote unquote integrity, because of where the planets are essentially placed. This is a very good chart, even with the squares. Now, the Mars-Neptune opposition, that could be a little tricky. But Mars is in the 6th house. So that's all about work, like really hard. It's hard work. This would be a chart where the person would, again, this would be a chart where a person could put in the hard work, the effort, and the energy, and that would be required in a chart like this. They'd have to watch out for overworking, by the way, because of that Mars-Neptune opposition. They could work until they would be exhausted, and then they'd have to go over to the 12th house and recharge. And maybe that would just be the kind of the program or the model for their life. They'd also have to have ultimately a spiritual purpose. Like they'd have to have something inherent that they would be putting that work towards. And if they could find that thing with Neptune in the 12th, and then work that Mars every single day, they could be pretty tremendous in a lot of ways. But they'd have to watch out for overwork and exhaustion. And there's a lot of force in this chart with the Sun-Mars conjunction, even in the sign of Virgo. And even if the Sun is at 29 Virgo, which is, of course, anaretic, Mars would actually give it more power. It would give it more of a sense of intensity. It would, because by the time you get to 29, the Sun is done. Right? It's just done. There's nothing left. But Mars here is the booster pack. And it would not be a typical kind of anaretic degree. Unlike myself, who just has my Sun at 29 degrees, trying to finish up the Virgo lifetime here. This person could do this, even with this Sun in the 6th house, which again takes off some of that kind of anaretic nature. Why? Because it's in dignity. Dignity, Virgo, Sun and Virgo in the 6th house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets, all in dignity. It'd be a very interesting chart. And then, of course, we have the trine with Mars to Saturn, trine to Mars, Pluto. That's a lot of intensity. A lot of ambition, but not afraid to work. It's a very interesting chart. Very interesting chart. The big squares are, of course, that T-square in the cardinal signs with Venus and Mercury squaring off against the moon, and Pluto for the most part, and I guess maybe a touch of, Saturn for the most part, and a touch of Pluto. Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? Because when you get into the square with the moon, because Libra wants to go along to get along. That's basically the nature of Libra. Libra every now and then will surprise you about how, I wouldn't say forceful, but every now and then Libra will say enough is enough, and I'm going to go over to the other side of this scale. And I'm going to do something out of character and be forceful, or I'm going to assert my will. But that's generally not how Libra works. I mean, if they've been going along to getting along for a long time, then they'll tip the scales in the other way to try to get some balance back. And that's when you'll see Libras who will act uncharacteristically. You'll be like, wow, how did you do that? Right, but so when we have the square here to the moon, there is, I think the individual would be more prone to sacrificing what they want or what they need in order, in some ways, to kind of please the mother or please the family or please the home. And there may even be conflict in relationship, that if a person with this chart would set out to be in relationship, have a relationship, which they would, obviously, with Venus and Mercury, there could be conflict with the mother in the home, that they may not approve of the relationship. That could be quite possible. So there would have to be some kind of reconciliation between how this person is thinking and the type of partnership or relationship or contract that they want with another, and their feelings. I think this could be very difficult for a person with this chart. But there's also kind of a lot of expansion potential too, because of the sextile with Jupiter. And so could be a lot of excitement at the beginning of a relationship, because that's, sextiles tend to have kind of young and initiatory energy. So there could be a lot of excitement when a relationship would be initiated. And maybe this is the case for this week ahead, by the way, because this is kind of the template for this week ahead. And that there can be new connections that can come into your life with a Venus, Jupiter sextile, Mercury, Jupiter sextile. Could be cool. Could be interesting. Could be exciting. Could be positive. And then that moon kicks in, and it's the Cancer moon. Obviously, it's right now it's at 11 degrees. By the time you get up tomorrow, it'll still be in the sign of Cancer. It'll be shifted a little bit. But again, the Cancer moon wants to hang on to things, wants to hold on, it wants to cling, it wants emotional security. And what we have here is we have the potential for opening here, because the sextile is, remember, it's initiatory energy. And yet there's a pattern in place here, which is very difficult, I think, to reconcile in a lot of ways. Not only because the energy of Cancer and Libra is so very different, but also we bring this square with Saturn into the equation. And it's almost as if Saturn acts as kind of like this karmic ledger sheet with the square to Venus. And there's like this kind of intense sort of heaviness, and thou shalt or thou shalt not with the Saturn Venus square. It can be it's not always bad. Like they did this study a long time ago with synastриc charts, and for a long time it was generally viewed, when people had a Venus square synastrically, meaning, let's say, for instance, one person's Venus was in, say, Libra, and the other person's Saturn was in Capricorn, that was generally viewed as being not a measure for success in a relationship. The same thing could happen with a composite chart. And between the two people, they would have a Venus Saturn square in the composite chart. So what they did is they ran a lot of these charts, and they found a bunch of people who had these charts. I forget who did it. I think it might have been, was it Alfie Lavoie? It might have been Alfie Lavoie. But they ran a bunch of these charts, and they talked to the people who had these Venus angles, either the square to Venus synastrically or the square to Venus in the midpoint composite chart. And they found, surprisingly, that their relationships were successful, which kind of cut against the grain with this sort of idea that the Venus-Saturn square would be the death blow to a relationship. And ironically, it wasn't. And then what they found was that when people had the Venus-Saturn square, they worked harder. They worked harder to keep things together. And then all of a sudden the light went off. So, oh, well, this is another interpretation of the Venus-Saturn square. So there's some of this in this chart. But when you bring the opposition to the moon in, that would change the equation dramatically. I think this person would have a very difficult time with relationship in general, even with Venus and dignity here. And there would always be this kind of escape route, right? With Venus sextile to Jupiter. It's like, I just want to go. I just want to get out of here. Let me go on a vacation. And let me go find an exotic lover in another country. That's kind of what that's about. Freedom. Freedom. Because the T-square here does not support freedom. It supports some form of deep commitment and duty with the Venus moon square, but based on what though, right? Based on what? Now we do have a nice moon trine to Neptune, which is great for dreaming. You guys should have good dreams tonight with the moon Neptune trine. That should be very nice. Maybe you want to take some of that sleepy time tea and snort a line of Xanax before you go to bed. Snort a line of Ambien. Isn't that what Tiger Woods used to do? Snort Ambien. I know that he used to screw on Ambien. That was his thing. That's such a weird thing because his programming was breaking down. That's what was happening when he was going through all that shit. And he was sleeping around on his wife with all these strippers and stuff. It was after his father had died, and his father was his handler. So he was doing stuff like they were like taking Ambien and having this Ambien sex, which they wouldn't even really remember it. I'm like, well, what was really going on there? You know, it was almost like maybe they were working on some kind of possession thing, you know. But it was almost like this strangely pharmaceutical occult sex magic, where they would just kind of check out, or maybe somebody else would check in. Has that ever happened to you during intimacy? Has that ever happened to you? This is a real question, okay? Have you ever, and it's a kind of a personal question, but you know, you're in a chat room, really, who knows you? But you don't have to answer it anyway. But have you ever, in the act of sex, felt like there was a transpersonal force that was essentially circulating through you and even through the other person? Have you ever felt that before? If you felt that before, raise your hand. And then all of a sudden there's something much bigger going on. Have you ever experienced that? I have. I've experienced that on a number of occasions. Maybe in a while, but on a number of occasions, right? So maybe this is what was going on with Tiger Woods and the Ambien sex rituals. Anyway, tonight should be a good night for dreaming with the moon Neptune trine. The moon will be kind of closer into orb later tonight. And again, from an individual chart with the moon Neptune trine, there would be an inherent amount of kindness in this chart. I think once this person could figure out that they didn't have to please everybody, that they didn't have to please the mother and the father, the moon Saturn opposition. And by the way, if you ever read charts with people, if you ever read charts and you see moon Saturn opposition, 9 times out of 10 there's a divorce, that the mother and the father are split. And I've read charts where that wasn't the case, but if you drill down deep enough, you'll find that the mother and the father have a very distant relationship, like they're married but they're roommates. So if you ever see somebody in a moon Saturn opposition, ask them about their parents, if they got a divorce. I bet you the answer is yes. I had a really interesting reading on Friday night, and it was with somebody in China. I have a client in China, a very interesting person. And this thing kind of blew my mind. So I've been having some really interesting kind of psychic stuff happen lately with the readings. But I mean, that's always kind of a part of it. But I've been sort of tapping in psychically with folks. It's been interesting. And so we started this conversation on Facebook, and I've done some work with her before. But I said, I'm picking up something about children in the text. And she said, well, I'm pregnant. I said, okay, Great. So we set the reading up, and I didn't know I knew we were going to talk about pregnancy, and I knew when she reached out, it had something to do with children. So I popped her chart up, and this is somebody who has a very transpersonal chart. Sun in Capricorn conjunct the midheaven. Not what I would call mother material, by the way. Nothing below the horizon. Nothing. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This person's having a child. So then she goes on to tell me the story about the child. She goes on to tell me that she went to the hospital in China to go to check out for something. She found out a couple different things. First of all, she found out that her tubes have been tied. Wow, it's kind of intense, right? And then she had some sort of something sclerotic. She couldn't really translate it into English. I'm assuming there might have been scarring or something. So she's at a serious deficit for having a child. She goes on to tell me that her husband, and this is, she's being very frank, her husband had his sperm tested, and a lot of them were defective. That the tails were broken or the head was cut off or whatever. So he wasn't shooting from a full clip. Let's put it that way. So based on all that, she then goes on to tell me that she's pregnant. And I'm like, just blown away. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You have your tubes tied, you got the sclerotic scarring thing or whatever, and your husband is like, firing, I don't know, but bath salts or something, Epsom salt bullets, Epsom, these two, when you were a kid and you got onto somebody's property, they'd shoot you with shotgun shells filled with Epsom salt, not a real bullet. That's the analogy I was going for. And yet they're pregnant. Blew me away. It's like, when the miracle of life wants to come in, the door, it's like, forget it. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. You get a guy, he's 3 years younger than me, so 56 years old, a gal who was at a disadvantage biologically, and they're going to have a baby, and looks like it's going to be an Aquarian. Look at the chart, a very interesting chart. Very interesting. Anyway, just thought I'd pass that along to you. Just kind of a story, anecdotal thing. I like this chart. I actually like it, even with Chiron on the ascendant, the wounded self, opposing Venus. This person might have a difficult time in a relationship. But I think ultimately they'd be a healer. And with Chiron on the ascendant, that would be, Chiron is the wounded healer. So this person, I think, would wind up being a healer. And pulling that Chiron from the 12th house would be certainly very interesting. Something just beneath the surface of things. And I don't know if you've ever spent time with Aries people or people that have Aries on the ascendant. And they have, if you've ever had like a massage from a person who's an Aries or Aries ascendant, they have the hottest hands. Aries runs the hottest energy of any sign in the zodiac. And what's interesting is a lot of Aries people won't give two shits about doing massages because it's really not their thing in a lot of ways. Every now and then you'll find somebody like that. Maybe they're Taurus rising and they have Sun in the 12th house. But Aries have heaters, man, total heaters. And this person would be able to channel a lot of energy. Now that chirotic crisis would occur right around the age of between 2 and 4. I did a reading this last week with this guy from, this young guy, super cool guy. Really liked this guy. But I was looking at his Chiron in his 12th house. And it was right now, because he had Chiron in Taurus. where it's Chiron in Taurus, and it's what is it doing now? It's sextiling something. It's sextiling Neptune right now, Pisces, healing. So I was looking at Chiron in Taurus. I said, you know, by the way, people have Chiron in Taurus. I think it's one of the hardest Chirons there is, to be honest with you, because Taurus is the earth, and it's all about being grounded and having a body. And most of the time, when I talk to people who have Chiron and Taurus, they're some of the most disconnected, ungrounded people. And when I say disconnected and ungrounded, it doesn't mean they're not functional. A lot of these people are very functional, but they have absolutely kind of zero relationship with the planet and their bodies in a lot of ways. It's very interesting to connect in with some of these people, because their wound happens to be being on Earth and being in a body. And so he has this in his chart, like in the 12th house. And I said, well, this is going to heal now, because I was looking at some of the angularity of his chart. So this is going to heal now. It's going to be a good time for you. And I said, you know, whatever happened to you between the age of 4 and 6, because I think his Chiron was at 5 Taurus. And that usually that degree is like the chirotic crisis, give or take a year or two in the other side, coming into it, being at that point, you know, and then, you know, separating away. And I said, what happened to you then? He says, I know exactly what happened to me. I said, my parents got divorced. I was 3.5. So it started at 3.5 and probably really kicked in at about 4 and then 5, you know, everything started to kind of pull us. He says, and I said, wow. And then he says, then I don't have a memory after that until I'm 10. He goes basically from 4 to 10 and has no memory. 6 years. And that's not uncommon, by the way. It's not uncommon, and it's not uncommon for people who have Chiron in Taurus. I've seen this. It's a very interesting aspect. So anyway, this chirotic crisis in this chart would be between the age of like 2 and 4. So shortly after birth. You'd also have to look at here, the wound to the head will play kind of a significant role in this chart. And maybe around between the age of 2 and 4, the person would suffer a wound to the head. I actually read for somebody like this one time, and they had their Chiron at, I think, at about 1. I think it might have been about 2. I think it was 2 Aries. And I asked him, did you have a blow to the head as a child? And he said, yes, I fell down a flight of stairs at that time, right around that time. And it took her about 1.5 years to kind of recover and get her bearings and kind of walk again. So the Chiron, it doesn't happen like that all the time. Just to let you know, I'd say it's about 90% of the time where you can see it in the chart. Some person will say, well, I don't know really what happened, or nothing happened. That does occur. Astrology is a really interesting tool. It's not always an exact science. Sometimes it can be. But and I think it would be boring if it was a totally exact science. You know, be too pat, be too rote. Anyway, a very interesting chart. And the week ahead, well, you've got Mars trying to Pluto. It's separating, but a lot of intensity and channeling a lot of power. And then, you know, the moon will come into sextile later tomorrow with Mars and the Sun. So that'll get it out of that tight T-square, which will be good. So by the time you guys tap into work tomorrow, if you're in another part of the world, you're tapping into work now, later tomorrow night, I think the energy will come off this T-square and be much more workable and much more pleasant in a lot of ways. Much, much more pleasant. And we're coming up here pretty soon with the new moon. We're going to have the equinox tomorrow. And that moon will be in Cancer on the equinox tomorrow. Be interesting. Okay. That's it for now, for the chart of the moment. Let me get in here and check in with you guys and see how you all are doing. If you have any feedback that you want to share. What do we got here? Let's see. Let's see, weird, my Chiron is opposite my ascendant. I also fell down the stairs as a child and have a scar on the corner of the forehead. There you go. Interesting. Chiron oppose your ascendant. Very interesting. Chiron is almost always opposed Uranus, by the way. Just to let you know. Jasper, back in the mix. Let's see what here. China is out, India is in. India chose sides. What do we have here? I have Chiron and Taurus. Explains a lot. Lately, I've been craving being near beautiful landscapes, screen, anything. I think I'm craving that grounding that I don't naturally have. Yeah, that's the essential part. A lot of people with Chiron and Taurus are very capable people. You would think to yourself, wow, my God, this person, they're so capable. You know, I have a client who has Chiron and Taurus. He's a very capable guy. There's this kind of disconnect with this central core that connects him to the planet. So, you know, it's an interesting dilemma in a lot of ways. All right, why don't we jump into the meat of the show? So, I ran across this character, this guy. Some of you may know who he is, and some of you may not know who he is. For those of you who don't know who he is, we're about to find out who he is. And he could be one of the most important people on the planet right now. And in fact, he would love to see, he would love for me to say that about him. It's not anybody I know, by the way. So let me throw up his picture here. And so you guys can see who I am talking about. And it is not Justin Trudeau. I can guarantee you that. Let's see what we got here. I guess I have to go back and find this picture. I thought I'd get a screen grab on. Oh, here he is. Okay, I did get a screen grab. All right, this is the guy. The more that I look at him, the more he reminds me of a vampire. This dude. This is Adam Neumann. Actually pronounced, well, I'm sure it's Neumann, but it's Neumann. Spelled like Gary Newman. Anyway, this guy is a pretty interesting character. He is the CEO and founder of a company called WeWork. And some of you may know what WeWork is. It is basically a shared workspace. Now, this guy is born in Israel. He was raised on a kibbutz, which is basically a group farm, a socialist farm. Nobody owns it. It's a collective. So starting something like WeWork is right up his alley because that's what he grew up on. And he was born in 1979. He just turned 40. He's a Taurus. So you know that money is his thing. He is 6'5". I think he has 5 children by this point. And he is the CEO of WeWork. Now, WeWork is it's the shared workspace concept where, let's say, Jasper wanted to start a business, but he couldn't afford an office. WeWork essentially leases buildings. They lease buildings from commercial realtors or people that have commercial real estate space. They own the people that own buildings. So they lease the buildings out. They get 5-6 year leases. And they then say, okay, well, you can have a desk here, a terminal here, and you can pay us, I don't know, $600 a month. You get to go there, you get to incubate, you get to hang out with other incubators, and you don't have to pay for office space. You don't have a long-term lease. Sounds all very good on the surface. There are things like fax machines and T1 lines and all those things that you need to run a startup company. And it's been incredibly successful. WeWork is in over 400 cities on the planet. And as a result of this, they've gotten a lot of buzz and a lot of sizzle for an IPO. Now, what's really interesting about WeWork is how it got funded. And I'm going to get into this guy here a little bit. First, I'm going to tell you how it got funded. Let me just get in here and do. Find this page. You're going to see it. It's a big deal. Nope, nope, nope. So I'm going to throw this up here. Just keep that. Keep this in mind. Okay, this is a big deal. Just remember this. Okay, so I'm going to throw this graphic down. I'm going to do another share with you. This is from the New York Times. Let's do this here. Look at the New York Times. Always wants you to like have an account. Let's see if we can do. Let's do this. All these major news groups want you to sign up for a damn. CNN. CNN is. All right. So let me do a share on this. You can see where this is going. All right, so this is from CNN Business. Some WeWork board members reportedly looking to remove Adam Neumann. So let me just kind of give you the background. So WeWork right now is the largest commercial real estate holder in New York, London, and Chicago. Think about that for a moment, okay? 3 of the world's biggest financial centers, New York, London, and Chicago. WeWork has rented out the most commercial real estate in all 3 of those cities. Now, they got a shit ton of money from this company, this SoftBank, the Japanese company, SoftBank. You remember when Trump said, okay, so Trump is a cagey fucker. He really is. So when he got elected, after he got elected, he started talking about how all these companies were going to, be doing business and doing all this stuff. Hey, no, don't do that. Jasper's about to go for a fly on the lights. It could be a disaster. Leave it alone. Okay? The fly's okay. So are you. So Trump announced that SoftBank, you guys must remember this, SoftBank was going to bring in $100 million, some significant amount of money into the US economy. Well, what SoftBank did was SoftBank borrowed a bunch of money from Saudi Arabia. SoftBank took that money and then invested it in WeWork. So when Trump was talking about the SoftBank investment, he was talking about WeWork. Now, here's the deal. This guy, Adam Neumann, wants to be, first of all, he's so cocky, so arrogant that he wants to become president of the United States. And he says, I will get people to amend the Constitution since I was born in Israel. Well, I tell you right now, that's probably not too far off, right? I think at some point they'll have this sort of joint nation thing going on with the United States and Israel. Somebody who's Israeli probably could wind up running for president. I shit you not. I think it's probably not far off. But he also sees himself as being not just the president of the United States, president of the world. Okay? So this guy, Neumann, the new man, Adam, the new Adam, has big plans. Now, but what he's done, though, is he's completely over-leveraged this business. Completely. And what he was doing is he was taking, so he has his own kind of IPO initial stock, right? Like when you have a company, you get a huge chunk of stock before it goes public. They're called founder shares. All right, that's the game. And what he's been doing is he's been borrowing money against his founder shares. And then he's going out and then buying buildings and then leasing those buildings back to WeWork. So he's essentially a great Ponzi schemer is what he is. But I'll read this to you a little bit, and I'm going to get into the astrological part, and you'll see what's happening. So some WeWork board members want to remove Adam Neumann as chief executive of the company. The Wall Street Journal and other outlets reported, citing people involved in the talks. This is a very big deal because they're getting ready to turn this thing into an IPO. WeWork is about to go public, but they're bleeding cash in a big way, in a really big way. And just remember, they are the largest holder of leases in commercial real estate property in the three largest markets, financial markets on the planet. The board could meet as early as this week to discuss a proposal for Neumann to become the company's non-executive chairman, the Journal reported. This would allow him to stay at the co-working real estate company he built over the past decade while bringing in new leadership to shepherd We through its IPO. He bought the trademark We for $6 million. WeWork declined to comment for this story, citing the quiet period ahead of its public offering. SoftBank did not return a request for the comment. SoftBank has invested billions into the We company. Billions. Ronald Fisher, vice chairman at SoftBank, and Mark Schwartz, former board director at SoftBank, joined the company's board as a part of a 2017 $4.4 billion investment. That's okay. It was a $4.4 billion investment. That's what Trump was talking about with SoftBank. That's what he was talking about. How did Trump know about this, by the way? I'll tell you how he knew about it. It's through Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner and Adam Neumann are buddies. They are buddies. They're tight. The other guy that they're tight with is Ben Salman. Bone Salman. They're an unholy triumvirate, these three. So that's how Trump knew that SoftBank was going to invest billions into the economy, because it was going right into WeWork, and he knew that because of Jared Kushner. And remember, this is commercial real estate, so it's also up Trump's alley. Of course, you would know about it. Okay, so $4.4 billion investment in We by SoftBank. SoftBank is Japanese. One of the richest guys in the world owns SoftBank. Certainly the richest guy in Japan. But Neumann, who is one of 7 board members, is We's controlling shareholder, giving him the power to fire the board. You think he's going to do that? You think he's going to do that? You damn right he'll fire the fucking board. Or he'll use that as leverage to get the board to vote for him. The news comes at a tumultuous time for the We company and its IPO ambitions. The company last week delayed the public offering until at least October, and its potential IPO valuation continues to fall. On Wednesday, a Wall Street report detailed Neumann's unusual leadership style. We're going to look at this chart. And potential conflicts of interest. And on Friday, a Fed official said he worries co-working spaces could worsen commercial real estate losses in the next recession. Okay? This is what I'm talking about. This is what I am talking about. That is the big worry, because WeWork has come in to all these cities. There are 400 cities that WeWork is in. 400. And remember, London, New York, and Chicago, the big 3, they have leases on more commercial real estate than anybody else in those cities. They're the largest. What happens if WeWork takes a dive? What do you think is going to happen to that commercial real estate? Can you see a domino effect beginning here? Now, one has to wonder also, is this potentially a controlled demolition? Now, I'm not talking about the buildings themselves imploding, but is this a controlled demolition? And will this guy, Adam Neumann, is he somehow engineering a controlled demolition? And will he come out on the other side of this even more powerful than before? Let me continue to read this. The money losing but quickly expanding company needs the infusion of cash an IPO would bring to fuel future growth. But since the publicly filed paperwork for an IPO last month has been criticized for its governance structure and has reportedly considered cutting its IPO valuation more than in half. So they were originally supposed to get out of the gate at 47 billion. Now they're down to 10 billion. And you think, well, it's still 10 billion, but that's a huge gap, really significant. And if you're an investor or a potential investor, or you're even the government and you're looking at something like this, you're saying, holy shit, that's a pretty wide gap. $37 billion? What's going on here? Let me read a little bit this a little more. The hurdles for WeWork's IPO may be a signal that investors are losing patience with a path many other tech startups have taken. Pursuing a public offering with a high private market valuation, even while losing billions of dollars and being run by a founder with outsized voting controls. I used to work for a company in California, kind of a similar model in some ways. And what they did is they did an IPO, and they based the IPO not on anything that they had. They based the IPO on what they proved they could have. So basically, they were using this kind of long tail formula for the acquisition of content, and that they were able to prove that if they were to own content, say a recording or a movie, right, that would be then streamed on third-party provider, that they would be able to pay that content back by year 3, and in years 4, 5, and 6, they would make money off that content without any kind of I wouldn't say strings attached, but they wouldn't have any debt to fulfill because of that content. This company I work for did a whole IPO based on that they provided a kind of a magical formula. It's like, sure, you do an IPO, you can sell stock and get money, and that's how it worked, right? It wasn't a very good formula. And ultimately the company got run into the ground. It was not a Walmart company. Anyway, this is what they're doing in some ways. The same, it's like, again, I was around the business in Silicon Valley in and around like 1997, 1998. People were starting companies with half-baked ideas. getting investment money, and a lot of them were done within a year of their IPO. Done. And it's kind of like, okay, well, let's get the money, and then we'll figure out how we're gonna make it, right? So they're doing the same thing here, but the Ponzi scheme is the buildings, because they don't own anything. Now, the buildings that they do own, they've tied those buildings to WeWork, right? So even if WeWork has these buildings, and those buildings that they own, which is Neumann borrowing, using his stock, his founder shares, and borrowing against it, that doesn't necessarily indemnify those buildings if WeWork takes a dump. And if anything, those buildings could then be used as collateral for any kind of debt service. If it goes into bankruptcy, if WeWork goes into bankruptcy, those buildings will be snatched. But what will they be worth anyway in a collapsing commercial real estate market? Okay, so let me do this. Read a little more here. It's unclear whether board directors could actually push Neumann out as CEO. We created multiple classes of stock, giving Neumann voting control of the company's decisions. According to its IPO prospectus, after facing criticism over the deal, Neumann repaid $5.9 million that We Company had paid him in exchange for his trademark of the word "we." So he paid that back because he went out, he had it for $6 million. Even still, Neumann retains a controlling stake. The move, along with the addition of a new board member and changes to WE's corporate governance structure, was made to salvage the company's IPO ambitions. Earlier this month, we also scrapped a plan detail that in its prospectus, it would have allowed Neumann's wife, Rebecca, to pick the company's next CEO instead of opting to rely on the board. Oh, great. Let your wife pick the next CEO. Oh, well, I think I should be the next CEO. You asked me, I'm going to pick myself. See how that works? If he were removed as CEO, Neumann would join another controversial CEO pushed out of the top leadership position at its high-value tech company, struggled to maintain its growth, prepare for public offering. Uber founder Travis Kalanick, then also the company's majority shareholder, was forced to resign as Uber CEO in 2017 after pressure from investors in the wake of the company culture concerns and criticisms over Uber's treatment of drivers. But removing Kalanick didn't save some investors from going into the red after Uber made its Wall Street debut earlier this year. Since its public listing, Uber stock has fallen more than 20% from 41.57 to 32.60. Again, this is a company that doesn't build any fucking thing. You know, it's just this repurposing economy. It's this repurposing economy. It's not quite the share economy, it's repurposing. Okay, well, we're just going to use other people's cars. We're going to start, you know, they're building services, I guess, but they don't own those cars. They don't. Now, they have a buy program. Apparently, you can buy a car through Uber and pay the car off by driving. But cars are a terrible investment. Once you buy a car, as soon as it rolls off the lot, you lose 40% of the damn thing. So this is another company that is using a model where they're not even really creating anything. And in the case of Neumann, they're actually sort of reinvesting, you know, in something in a way that's not even really quite ethical, right? Because what happens if this IPO doesn't fly, or what happens if the SEC gets involved in this? And he's got these buildings that he's purchased on stock that is worthless. But the biggest concern here, and this gets into, we're going to get into the astrological piece. Because what are we dealing with astrologically? We're dealing with Saturn in Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, South Node in Capricorn. Now, Cancer, if we were to kind of ascribe a value to Cancer, and let's say the true node in Cancer, that would be like domesticity, it'd be domestic. Like Cancer would represent domestic real estate. Capricorn would represent commercial real estate, right? So what do we have? We have the South Node right now in conjunction, kind of right at the mid-orb between Saturn and Pluto. And we're coming up on a very significant eclipse in December that will involve the sun, the moon, a lot of planets in Capricorn. And these guys are looking at an IPO October, November. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because they're not just any other company. Adam Neumann has tied his company to the largest share of commercial real estate, pretty much, I would say, on the planet right now. 400 cities WeWork is in. The largest cities, or the largest share of commercial real estate that WeWork has leases in: London, Chicago, and New York. What happens? What happens if the IPO goes sideways? What happens if the SEC gets involved? Well, I'll tell you what happens. The commercial fucking real estate market is going to implode. It's going to implode. It'll implode in London, Chicago, and New York. And you think, well, it's just 3 cities. It is a domino effect. There are 400 other cities that WeWork has leases on. It's a domino effect, and it could be a disaster, an absolute disaster waiting in the wings. And there are people who profit off disasters. It's disaster capitalism. And don't you think that there is probably a plan in place that if it does happen, let's just say, for instance, let's play this out for just a second, okay? Let's say, for instance, Adam Neumann and his wife Rebecca and whoever else is kind of on their team is thinking, okay, we could corner the entire commercial real estate market after it implodes for pennies on the dollar. Because that's what they did with the Great Depression. And all the big guys got out before the Great Depression. They all got their money out. And so when the market collapsed and everything went to pennies on the dollar, they went back in, they bought it all up. So what if this did happen? And then through Adam Neumann and his deep assets, remember now, he's buddy with Ben Salman. He's buddy with Jared Kushner, which means he's probably buddy with that investment circle that is sort of in that dark universe. People like Sheldon Adelson and Paul Singer and a bunch of other people that are and have contributed to the Trump campaign. You look at the Trump campaign, there's all fucking Goldman Sachs people. What if they're sitting around saying, okay, we're going to wait, and this thing is going to be a domino effect. When it's all said and done, we're going to go in either under one company or the auspice of multiple companies. We're going to buy this up at pennies on the dollar. We'll own the buildings, we'll own the land, and it's a controlled demolition. I would not be surprised if this is somehow part of the plan. Now, would they love to have WeWork, have this glorious IPO? Quite frankly, I bet you they don't give a shit, to be honest with you. They don't give a shit because they're already on to whatever they're doing next. So let's look at this guy's Neumann's chart. And I'm going to look at it specifically. Here, let me just grab his chart. Because I have it with the eclipse. What I want to do is I just want to look at his raw charts. Let me go back in here. This is a big deal, and there's also a lot of other stuff happening financially as well. So this is just kind of one piece, but it is a pretty significant piece. Now, obviously, I don't know the time of his birth. I gave him a sunrise chart, but we're going to look at his chart, and you're going to see some stuff in here. It's going to kind of blow your mind a little bit. Okay. All right, so this is Newman's chart, the new man, Andrew Newman, Adam Newman, Adam Newman, the new Adam. Oops, wrong chart, my bad. There we go. Okay, so remember I gave him a sunrise chart, put his sun on the ascendant. So he's another Chiron in Taurus person. Interesting. Sun in Taurus. So keep that in mind. So he's got, Taurus are into money. They're into, land, material assets. He's got, again, part of fortune because of the sunrise chart in Taurus. But what you really, really want to look at here is this. He has a stellium, 4 planets in Aries. Venus in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Mars in Aries, Moon in Aries. And by the way, that's a balsamic moon. Do you think that this guy is somebody who takes no for an answer? To me, this assemblage of Aries is slightly ruthless, slightly ruthless. And the reason why is because we have a Mars-Moon conjunction. So the desire quotient is extremely high. Like, this is somebody who, when they want something on an emotional level, and desire stems from emotions. Where your moon is, right? It's an aspect of desire. If you have moon in Libra, you desire peace. If you have moon in Cancer, you desire security. If you have moon in Virgo, you desire, I don't know, a clean house. That's the moon represents some form of desire because it's our emotions. So this guy is, what Aries is into? Aries is into power. It's into power. So this guy is very power oriented. Remember, he wants to be president of the United States and thinks he wants to be president of the world. And what do we have here? We have Pluto at 17 opposing the moon and opposing Mars. To me, that Pluto moon and Pluto Mars opposition is potentially ruthless, absolutely ruthless. And that this person will do whatever it takes to acquire whatever Pluto is involved in the chart. Remember, this is a sunrise chart. Pluto represents assets. And, with Pluto in Libra is like the assets of relationships or the assets of contracts. Because that's all he has are these contracts. Contracts with people having space inside WeWork. Those are minimal. He's not going to get rich off of them, but he's leveraging them for an IPO that's really, really shaky. The other thing that kind of blew my mind about this chart is that he doesn't have any water in his chart. He's got no water in his chart. He's got Uranus and Scorpio, whoop-de-dee. No water in his chart. Now, if you don't have any water in your chart, what have I said about that? People that don't have any water in their chart have a very difficult time experiencing empathy because they have no real emotional conductivity in the chart. That doesn't mean that if you're kind of, you don't have a lot of water in your chart, it's not the end of the world, okay? It's not the end of the world. You can look at, where certain planets are in certain houses. Now, this is a sunrise chart. I don't know what time this guy is born. But when I don't do that, I create a sunrise chart because it generally puts the sun on the ascendant. So if you don't have any water in your chart or lack of water, what's in your 4th house, what's in your 8th house, what's in your 12th house? What's your rising sign? If you have a water rising sign, it can make a big difference. Sometimes it can be maybe too emotional if you have a water rising sign and no other water to balance it out, but that's another story. He's got no water. And the water he does have, it is impersonal water. It's Uranus and Scorpio. And he's going to have Uranus opposition over the next couple of years. And that'll be very interesting. He's got Uranus on his sun right now. Uranus on his Chiron. He's a risk taker right now. That's what's going on with Uranus. You can see Uranus right there, right? He's going in. This guy's making a very big play, and I don't think he cares whether or not his business. He's got it worked out so that's what I think, that if it fails, that there's a plan B, and they go in and then they scoop up basically everything on the cheap. And maybe that was the plan to begin with. Or maybe he wants to just become the giant WeWork king of the world, in which case he wins that way. But there's no empathy in this chart. And with all this Aries is, I think, to me, look, just to let you know, I don't have a problem with planets being in multiple. I've got 3 planets in Libra, okay? I've seen stelliums in, massive stuff. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have problems in, multiple planets in Aries. If somebody's got 2 or 3, it's not that big, but the way that this is set up, that's a lot. And the balsamic moon, which is a dissipative moon, it's a moon at this point where you have to let go of things. If you have a balsamic moon, you've got to, if something doesn't work, you let it go. And part of the lesson of the balsamic moon is to let go. You think this guy's going to let go? No. That's why we're talking not a great thing. Now he's got Mars in dignity, but he also has Venus in its detriment. So this is, and by the way, Jupiter in Leo, 0 degrees, he wants to be king of the fucking world. Of course he does. With Jupiter in Leo, 0 degrees, squaring his sun. We don't know if he squares the ascendant, but certainly he squares the sun. And it gets right into Venus, and it gets right into Mercury. And this guy, I'm telling you right now, this guy thinks he's brilliant. He believes that he could rule this fucking world. I'm telling you, this dude right here. Now, he does have a Saturn-Neptune square, and that's not great ultimately for his chart. Why do you think they want to oust him? Because he's got a Saturn-Neptune square. He is a terrible leader. He's a terrible leader. By the way, I'm going to go on record, and I'm going to say that Aries or Aries-heavy people aren't always the best leaders. They're very individualistic, and they're very good at getting things done and carving a path and being vanguard and pioneer, but they're not always the best leaders. Like, how many Aries presidents have we had lately? Very, very few, because they're not into it, right? They're not into it. Anyway, he's got Jupiter conjunct his Neptune right now. And I'm sorry, Saturn's not squared. It's his true node squaring his Neptune. My bad. He has a Saturn in conjunct with Mercury. Oh, that's interesting. That could also be the CEO piece. But he's got Jupiter on his Neptune right now. That's interesting. I mean, that's like boom or bust. Total boom or bust. And even like the Jupiter square the sun, that's like over leveraging. It's like, this guy doesn't care. He'll just start over. Like, there's some level of indemnification. And do you think that, how much do you think the SEC is going to do to him? Because one of his best friends is Jared Kushner. He's a commercial real estate developer. This guy probably knows he's untouchable. Anyway, so what I wanted to do with this chart, interesting. The inconjunct is interesting to me. He's got Saturn and Virgo. Virgo is the worker bee, right? And all those, it's the WeWork. It's such a Virgo kind of thing in a lot of ways. He's got his true node off 1 degree of my true node. That's interesting. But I think with the square to Neptune, that's tricky, man. That's totally tricky. And now we've got Venus. So he's going to have all these Libra planets in opposition. with his Aries planets coming up, he's going to have to make a deal. I think he's probably to cut a deal. Okay, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring in this chart because I wanted to bring up, let's see. All right, that's the chart. Okay. I had. All right, here it is. This is the chart. No, that's different. All right, this is it. Okay, so I just wanted to look at the December eclipse with this guy's chart. So we know what the December eclipse, we know what that factor is right there. It's 26 December 2019. And we have all this volatility down in Capricorn at that time. There's the new moon, Jupiter, Mercury. And here we've got all of his Aries planets squaring off against this eclipse in December. And his Pluto in Virgo is right on that eclipse moment. He's still going to have the let's see, square, Jupiter square, right? We know that for what's happening. Uranus is retrograde, and I think, what is it, at 1? Where are we with Uranus? It's at 2. So that's in square with his Jupiter. This eclipse for this guy could be an absolute and utter disaster. A disaster. Transiting Venus will be at in Aquarius at 7, squaring his sun and opposing his natal Jupiter. Wide opposition, 7 degrees. It could be a disaster. So if somehow he manages to push this IPO through, he's got to deal with this eclipse in December, and I think it could be a disaster for him. And if it's a disaster for him, and remember, the eclipse energy is a 6-month wave. Generally speaking, the intensity of it is 2.5 weeks before and 2.5 weeks after. So this kicks us out into the new year. Just keep that in mind. So based on what I'm seeing here, these people, like if they take him out of the mix, he's no longer the CEO of this company. He'll find some other way to gain control of the company. They'll do whatever they can to kind of circumnavigate the panic that these investors are having. Now, SoftBank invested $100 billion. What happens if this thing tanks? That's significant. They've got other investments. I think they were the ones that put up the money for Neon, if I'm not mistaken. They're the same group. That's where Ben Salman got his money to sort of launch the Neon project. So it's the SoftBank from Japan, Ben Salman, Adam Neumann, and of course, the third or the fourth part of that square is Jared Kushner. Keep your eye on what happens with WeWork. Very important. It's a very important sort of economic marker. And this guy, Adam Neumann, is, I think potentially it's a controlled demolition. That's my sense, that he doesn't care one way or the other who runs the damn company or where it goes. I don't think he gives two shits about the people who are in there trying to run their little startups and, put together their new little crypto or their new little blockchain model. I don't think he cares two shits about them. Who cares? Think about those people. They've got investments. They have people that have bought into what they do. What's going to happen to them? I mean, this whole thing could get very messy very quickly. So I just wanted to bring that up tonight and get that on your radar. Okay. Where are we? Get back into Chatlandia. See what's going on. Let's see. Adam Neumann looks like a serial killer. He does, doesn't he? He does. You know what's really weird about Adam Neumann? Let me show you this picture. Let me show you this picture. He totally does look like him. There's a weird thing going on with Adam Neumann and his wife. It's a very strange deal. You got to see this picture. There are pictures of Adam Neumann where he looks positively feminine. Let's see if I can. They look like vampires. The two of them look like here's a picture of them when they're younger. They look like vampires. The Ramirez thing is quite interesting. So here I'll show you. So to me, they look like vampires. And there are pictures. Oh, look, he's got an R around his neck. Maybe that stands for Richard. They look totally vampiric in a lot of ways. Now, she looks like a dude. And there are pictures where the two of them together, where he looks like a chick and she looks like a dude. Let me find one. So I can find a picture. This one kind of does some justice to the example I'm trying to together here. So there are times when he looks really feminine. And then there are times where she looks like a dude. Like there's something weird going on with them. Here, I'll show you another picture of him when he looks totally femmed out. Let's see if I can grab this one. Okay, this is one where he looks totally femmed out. Maybe this is after the vegan diet. Okay, you see how feminine he looks? I mean, she looks like a kind of a hard ass dude. So it's a weird vibe. These people have a very weird vibe, and that one with them in the black and white photos, they definitely looked very vampiric in a lot of ways. So anyway, keep your eye on Adam Neumann, WeWork, their IPO, and the commercial real estate market. You know, I think that quite possibly, if this thing has a domino effect, that's where the next crisis could be, next financial crisis. Okay, so what I want to do now is I'm going to roll the election chart for next week, because I'm going to get out of here in a few minutes. But I did want to do another chart before we shut her down tonight. One of the things that was really interesting that came to my attention is the fact that that they are really marketing Greta Thunberg and as this new Joan of Arc. That's really, so if you look at, it's kind of, I was thinking about this. And it's not just Joan of Arc. So if you look at like some of these kids who have these very powerful presence in the media and are these giants, they prop these kids up to be these young activist giants like David Hogg. What does David remind you of? It reminds you of King David, David and Goliath, the giant slayer. And then Emma Gonzalez, who was his partner in crime. You have Emma Goldman, who was basically a communist sympathizer and activist. And then we have Greta Thunberg, who is, in a lot of ways, very much like Joan of Arc, because that's kind of what they're marketing her as, Joan of Arc. So let's just bring up Greta's chart again. And actually, what I want to do is I want to find the Joan of Arc chart, because I actually cast this chart. Give me just 1 second. I'm just going to throw this up here. Now, remember, I don't know either of their birth times, and I'm dealing with the Julian calendar with Joan of Arc. Okay, so let me jump in here and do Greta. It's her. And let's do Jeanne d'Arc. Okay, that's right there. Okay, so we're gonna do a little synastry. The two of them. The thing that really grabbed my attention about Greta Thunberg and Joan of Arc are these weird similarities in that Greta Thunberg has Asperger's, autism, and Joan of Arc was epileptic. So they both have these kind of odd maladies. And Greta and they were both young, and they had some kind of supposed superpower or visionary ability to lead troops, young people, theoretically, into battle. Okay, both based in Europe as well. So let me we'll screen share here. Look at both the charts. Okay. So the thing, when I thought about it, it was like, yeah, there's a lot of similarity. And Joan of Arc is born on January 6th, and Greta Thunberg is born on January 3rd. So they're separated by 3 days in solar proximity. So they're conjunct one another. And what we have here is we have Venus. This is Joan of Arc's Venus in Capricorn, almost an exact conjunction with Greta Thunberg's moon. So let's see, Greta's moon is at 28 Cap, and Venus in Joan of Arc's chart, well, not exact, close, 17 Cap. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's wrong. No, my bad. Moon is at 17 and Venus is at 17, so it's exact. It's totally exact. Interesting. So there's some exactitude there with the two charts. You would think that, well, maybe because she was born at the same time, that would take place, of course. But Greta Thunberg is born on a new moon, as you can see, and she has the Chiron conjunction with the sun, which is sort of this wounded self, right? The wounded self, which is, and the sun in a lot of ways, represents the head as well. It's the head of the chart, even though the ascendant's the head of the chart. The sun is also the head of the chart as well. It's like, this is the locus. This is the theoretical sun in some way. Well, somebody could say the heart is the sun, whatever. But the sun to me also represents, it's the brain, right? So we have Chiron conjunct her sun, conjunct her moon. So she's unusual. We know that. We totally get that. And then we have Joan of Arc's Venus right here, conjunct the moon. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting is how her Saturn is in between Neptune and Pluto in Joan of Arc's chart, right? It's sort of tucked in between the two of them, and there is kind of a wide Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And then there is this Uranus-Neptune conjunction, which is very interesting in a lot of ways, because Joan of Arc was she was radical. Uranus, and she had Uranus in Aquarius, and Greta Thunberg also happens to have Uranus in Aquarius. The degrees are wide. It's 29 degrees for Greta, but Joan of Arc also had Uranus in Aquarius, which I think is, of course, they didn't know that Aquarius was around then, but we can go back and look, and we can assemble the chart thanks to technology and realize that that's where it would have been. And it's in conjunction with Greta's Neptune. So we get into the outer planets, you get into transpersonality, you get into archetypes. And this is kind of the radical archetype. And I do believe that, that there is some calculated, how do I say this, strategy around positioning Greta Thunberg as this modern day Joan of Arc. You're going to see more and more allusions to this with her. And she's fighting the war of climate change. And she's fighting the ignorance of people who will not wake up to climate change. And it's all part of this reenactment of the Children's Crusade. Now, what's interesting is Joan of Arc had Saturn in the sign of Taurus when she was born. And we have an opposition here with Venus and Mars. She's got that Venus-Mars conjunction, which is pretty trippy. And then the Saturn opposition, is it significant? Is it some kind of animating principle? Possibly. Possible. But I think really, if I were to look at these charts, I would say the things that I find the most interesting is the separation of 3 degrees or 3 days. The degrees are different because they're dealing with different calendars. You have 24 degrees and 12 degrees, right? They're different calendars. So, but separated by 3 days. The Venus-Moon conjunction with Thunberg being born in the new moon. And then this kind of transpersonal, transgenerational Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Aquarius, which is, revolutionary, right? It's very interesting. And they both have Uranus in Aquarius. I mean, to me, those are kind of the biggest pieces. The inconjuncts are kind of interesting too, like the Saturn inconjunct to Pluto in the chart, and then the Saturn inconjunct to, let's see, what is that? Saturn in Gemini, right? So she's got Saturn in Gem at 24. So the inconjunct is going to be 24. Oh, it's 24 Capricorn. That's almost exact. That is almost exact. Now, I would not go so far as to say that she's the reincarnation of Joan of Arc. I wouldn't say that. But I would say, because Saturn does represent time, that she would sort of tap in to a timeline that would be representative of, it's almost like reanimating the mythos. That's what it feels like. And it's kind of in this chart, especially with that Saturn inconjunct to the sun. Like, there's an interesting relationship between the two. Like, what if this was like kind of, a disincarnate spirit, or maybe some kind of collective energy that was left over from Joan of Arc, the job not finished or something like that, the job not done, looking for a place to attach into and call home. I mean, it's a theory that I'm playing with here because of the Saturn in conjunct with the sun, certainly from a cultural perspective, because Saturn does represent culture. From a cultural perspective, I think there is a very interesting relationship between the two. So look for more examples, more allusions to Greta Thunberg as the new Joan of Arc, or the sort of the modern day Joan of Arc. And I'm telling you, I think the girl is probably going to be nominated for Nobel Prize. But I also think at some point she's going to wake up. She'll wake up, and it'll be a very different day for young Greta Thunberg, whose father and grandfather were two very famous actors in Sweden, a mother an opera singer. She comes from a family of performers. Keep that in mind. Okay, let me check back in with you guys. Let's see what we have here. Joan of Arc would have better sense than to follow Greta's agenda. Yeah, you know, I mean, it's, but I don't think it would keep them from piggybacking on the archetype. I don't think they would act like they would protest, just protest actual corruption that can be avoidable. Okay, if you guys want to protest, right? If you want to protest, here's what you do. You do nothing. You do nothing. We could change the world. We could change the world in as easily as 45 to 60 days if, in this country, United States, if about 18% of the population didn't do anything for 30 days. 45 days. Let's say 45 days. Didn't go to school, didn't send your kids to school, didn't shop, didn't go to work. Just shut it down. Say, kind of done with this thing. Come back to us when you have a better deal. If you wanted to protest, best protest you do is do nothing. Just stay at home. Get to know your neighbors, unplug your cell phone, read books, buy candles, stock up on food, help each other, and that would throw a massive monkey wrench in this big fuck story like WeWork and all this bullshit that they're trying to stitch together and control the game. I mean, people are getting sick and tired of it. To be honest with you, it's just they're looking around, oh yeah, another clown with somebody else's money, with a fucking massive ego who wants to run the world. Great, just what we need. People are getting tired of this shit. So tired of it. Let's see. Vote with your dollar. Just stay home. Just stay home. I've been talking about this for years. Just stay home. Get 18% of the population to stay home for 30 to 45 days. They wouldn't know what the fuck to do. Wouldn't know. The problem is people are really scared. And they say, 30, 45 days. And people are so close to the vest that 30, 45 days could wipe them out, which is unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. Okay, I am out of here. I'm out of here. Out of. Thanks for being a part of tonight's show. It's been really good. I've enjoyed hanging out with you. Oh, the other thing, I just wanted to show this really quickly. So today's Andrea Bocelli's birthday. Guy with a great voice. He's got a great voice. And he's blind. He's blind, right? And I thought to myself, can you see blindness inside of a chart? I've never really looked at that before. Just to be honest with you, I haven't really looked at that before. And you know what? I'll be damned if Andrea Bocelli does not have an afflicted Mercury on his ascendant. Check this out. And so the ascendant, like I said, is the head. It's the head of the chart. And here is the sun in the first house. And he's got Mercury right on the ascendant. Right? Here, the brain, the peepers. And look what Mercury's doing. Squaring Saturn. It's got a Mercury-Saturn square with Mercury. Right? I have that too. I have that Mercury. I don't know. I have Mercury-Saturn square. He's got it. And I thought, that's interesting. That's interesting. So in this case, one could actually make a case that his blindness could actually be seen in the chart. Now, I don't know the story behind his blindness. I don't know if he was born blind or became blind. I'm assuming he might have been born blind. I'm assuming that based on the chart. But it's interesting, for sure. It's very, very interesting. But the guy's got a heck of a voice. And look, he's got the true node in Taurus, right? The throat. He's got Jupiter there, and he's got Neptune there, conjunct, beautiful voice, second house. And he's made a lot of money off that voice. So the Lord taketh and the Lord giveth in this regard. Okay, just thought I'd show that to you. Kind of an interesting aside. All right, so thank you all, one and all, for being a part of tonight's show. Thank you, Chatlandia. I will be back on Tuesday with 15 Minutes of Flame. If you're interested in a reading, you can go over to my website, robertphoenix.com. Check that out. And I'll be putting this show up on that site probably tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm going to spend the next 2 hours and 13 minutes watching football and enjoying the end of my birthday. Okay, thanks once again. I love you all. I wouldn't be able to be here and be a part of this and do this if you weren't in the chat room. And this is a very special group, and some of us are getting together in October. I'm looking forward to seeing each and every one of you and coalescing our energy together in physical space in real time. It's going to be a pretty cool thing. So I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great week. I'm Robert Phoenix, and may the stars be with you.